You are listening to the Academic Wellbeing series, brought to you by Academdum. This series is designed to help you understand how to apply your faith to your academics. If you've ever felt overwhelmed, disconnected, or simply in need of direction, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
I believe that Jesus leveraged stories, leveraged parables because it's easier to recall, it's easier to remember, it's easier to relate to it. So he was communicating deep spiritual stuff, and leveraging stories made it relatable, made it understandable to the everyday man. Talking about the sower, the mustard seed. People know how tiny the mustard seed is, how so small, so tiny, right? And then talking about trees, birds, things like that. Now, number two, I believe that Jesus made use of stories, made use of parables, because it made the truth plain. Well, the truth hidden in plain sight, right? Hidden in plain sight. So he communicated this truth, but unless you actually took your time to listen and actually sit on it, you may not actually get the full stuff out of it. So that's why at some point his disciples had to ask him privately, like, what does this mean? We've heard the story, but what exactly does this mean? What exactly are you trying to say? And then he began to explain to them. Yeah, so you will see that people who desired to actually understand even the story asked the questions, right? So even though he said stories and it made it relatable, not everybody was still able to pick it, to understand it. But the thing is, they will not forget. They won't. So because it's a story, it will stick. Because it's a story, it will stay. They won't forget it actually. But the understanding of the story is the thing. Okay? Understanding of the story is now another thing. So, okay, I want to show you something. Okay, so we talked about, let's take a look at something, right, before we begin to round up. Come explain how to apply, like, why are we talking about parables, talking about academics, what's the relationship between parables, between stories, and my academic performance. So let's get into that now, right? Let's quickly take a look at Matthew chapter 13. Matthew chapter 13. We'll start from verse 31, right? So this particular chapter, now this Matthew chapter 13 is one chapter in the Gospel of Matthew that captures, oh my God, it's if all these stories, most of the stories that Jesus told in this very chapter, Matthew chapter 13. Now, let's get to Matthew chapter 13. We're still using the Message Bible translation, okay? So I'm going to read from verse 1, I'll read verse 2, I'll read verse 3. You can probably, in your private time while you're listening to this, you can just run through and read the rest of the verses, and then I'll jump to another verse. I'll jump to verse 31, okay? But just stay with me. I want to show you something here, how invested Jesus was into storytelling. Now, Matthew 13 verse 1. At about that time, Jesus left the house and sat on the beach. Jesus, he went to the beach in his time. Verse 2. In no time at all, a crowd gathered along the shoreline, forcing him to get into a boat. Now, verse 3 of Matthew 13, Message translation. Using the boat as a pulpit, Jesus addressed his congregation telling stories. Can you see that? Jesus addressed his congregation telling what? Stories. Interestingly, you would notice that preachers as well, many preachers actually tell a lot of stories. They tell a lot of stories. They have a lot of stories to share. And you would see that for every time they share stories, it's like they are drawn, it's like the congregation is drawn even further into the message. So if you're a communicator, if you're a public speaker, if you're a leader at any level, stories. Don't joke with it. Storytelling is just this thing. Alright? Now, you see verse 3. Using the boat as a pulpit, he addresses this congregation telling stories. And then Jesus starts to talk about stories, talking about, okay, this was the story about the sower. Alright? Then he moves on to start talking about stuff. Okay, now you see verse 13, Matthew chapter 13, verse 13, Message translation. You would see the reason why. He says, that's why I tell stories, to create a readiness. Can you see that? Oh my goodness. The reason why Jesus tells stories, to create, this is the reason, this is the purpose of stories, okay? To create a readiness, to nudge the people toward receptive insights. Oh my goodness. To create a readiness and to nudge the people toward receptive insights. Wow. You heard that? That's Matthew chapter 13, verse 13, Message translation. That's Jesus himself telling you. Oh my God. Oh my goodness. Okay. Let's read from verse 12, okay? Matthew 13, verse 12. Let's read from verse 12. It says, whenever someone has a ready heart for this, the insights and understandings flow freely. But if there is no readiness, any trace of receptivity soon disappears. That is why I tell stories. He's telling stories to create the readiness. Stories help to create the readiness. That readiness allows insight and understanding to flow freely. That readiness allows insights and understandings to flow freely. Alright? It tells stories. Stories are there to nudge the people toward receptive insight. You want your classmates, you want your colleagues to receive what you're sharing. You want to nudge them to receive what you're sharing. You make use of stories. Alright? Make use of stories. Make use of stories. I, for one, when I teach about chemistry, because I teach about chemistry and science subjects, it's one of the areas of my strength. It's one of my areas of strength, rather. When I teach, for example, a time when I was working as a teacher and I was teaching physics, and I remember this in particular. Okay, I think it was biology, yes. There are many scenarios. I can't even keep track. There are just very few ones that were really remarkable for me that I remember. I don't, right? So this was one particular class we were teaching. It was a biology class, and I was talking about evolution, right? So the location of this, it's a it's a traditional setting location in a school, right? So the children predominantly even speak Yoruba compared to English. Yeah. But we still have to deliver lessons in English. I was trying to get them. We were talking about evolution and they were looking at me like I was speaking gibberish. And I was just in that moment wondering, okay, how do I communicate this thing to these people? Right? So I know they are very conversant with technology, they are conversant with phones and all that. So I asked them, when you see an iPhone 12, how do you know an iPhone 12? And interestingly, they answered me, okay, good. An iPhone 11, how do you recognize an iPhone 11? They told me, the camera is going to look like this, blah, blah, blah. Or an iPhone X, and it will look like this. iPhone 8, the shape is like this, and all those things. So, and I asked them, do you know what an iPhone 5 looks like? Do you know what an iPhone 4 looks like? They had no idea. You know what the very first iPhone looks like? They had no idea. I said, okay, fine, let's do some research. So I brought out my phone, we started searching online of the first iPhone. So I began to sketch all the history, like how the iPhone had changed over the many years. I began to sketch it on the board. So majorly just the back view. And for the ones, I think I just used the back view, right? So to show using that camera transition as the primary feature for comparison. So after we drew that, I was like, this is iPhone 1, iPhone 2, iPhone 3, iPhone 4, and then went on and on like that up until 14. And then I told them, this is evolution. They started looking at me. And I said, look at evolution is the change. It's change. It's change, okay? It's change in a particular species or in a set of organisms, right? Over a period of time. So, you see, this iPhone, for example, was created in maybe 2005. This one is 2025. You can see the literal transformation, the progressive change over time. And their faces just lit up instantly. And at that moment, I knew, yes, I've gotten this thing across to them. Right? So it's not exactly the typical Jesus parable kind of vibe. Right? But it makes it relatable at that point. Now, I communicated evolution to them. If they just take it like that, take it as iPhone, and then camera changing, yes, they may remember that moment, but it's practically still hidden in plain sight. So you still have to sit back and draw the connections. Like, okay, so what he's saying is that the same way iPhones have changed and transitioned over the years, that's the same way organisms also change and evolve over the years, right? So you'd see now that as a student or even a teacher, for example, you actually need to take stories more seriously. Right? You need to take stories more seriously. Draw parallels. Create stories around your coursework, with your coursework. Stories that help you understand your study materials better. It doesn't have to be anything deep or serious. I mean, for example, the whole iPhone stuff, it doesn't have to be anything deep. Right? But it would help when you're revising with friends and colleagues, while you're teaching friends, when you're teaching people in classes, in spaces, communicating. Stories help to make what you're saying relatable. Helps it stick even longer. Alright. So, okay, so let me tell you something very interesting. So, I remember while I was in school, I studied biochemistry, my first degree, and my wonderful friend, my best friend actually, myself and him, were being taught, okay, because he is also a biochemistry student, so we actually even follow one another, like matching number, right? And we had a particular, okay, now this was year 3. Most of our courses were about metabolism, metabolic pathways, and things like this. And we were trying to really understand and comprehend this thing, right? So one of these days, we were just enjoying ourselves eating, and then while we're eating, we just started examining our food. Okay, what? I think I was eating fried rice. Yeah, fried rice, plantain, a boiled egg on it. I think Angela had the same thing, maybe with jollof rice, I think. And Okay, yes, yes. So we had that, and then later in the night that day we got swallow. So bought swallow eba with egusi soup, and yeah, so it's a Pan African. Should I say Pan African now? But it's a traditional meal, or it's whatever is when you like make curry with hot water, right? And then egusi soup is like melon, blended with grounded melon, made and prepared into a soup. So we had that in the night, and then we just found ourselves comparing and thinking, like, okay, when we ate rice, which one gave us much more energy compared to egusi? And what are the pathways that would have been triggered? That would have been what's it called now? Activated based on what we ate. Now, just that little moment where we're interacting and engaging our minds and asking ourselves questions really helped us even see pathways in a better light. Now, why am I saying those were stories? Not exactly, but it helped us to recall, it helped us to remember, it helped us to be able to relate and bring these things that seem so abstract into practical sense, right? And you remember what we said? Even Jesus said that the reason why he tells stories, the reason why stories were a very important tool in his arsenal was to nudge people towards what? Receptive insights. So it wasn't really about the rice or the egusi. It was about we being able to receive, we having understanding at work in our hearts. So it doesn't have to be complex. It just has to be illustrative enough, right? So you don't have to write a script or anything. It just has to be illustrative enough to capture what you want to see and capture it into one feel. So it even becomes easier for you to remember while you're studying, remember while you're discussing, remember while you're writing the exam, because you just have to remember the exam. Although this is when you have brought out the wisdom in the story. So many people know and remember the Good Samaritan, but there are very few people that actually remember the essence. But because of how refreshing, or how, let me not say refreshing, how powerful, how effective the story was, people remember the story and subconsciously also pick up the lesson. All right, subconsciously also pick up the lesson. But at the end of the day, you need to understand and know what you're doing, because the story is just a container or communicating an idea or a concept. It's to help you understand the idea, to help you understand the concept even better. All right?
Amazing! You listened till the end. Now tell me, what was your aha moment while you listened? Share it in the comment section and let others learn from your experience. Also, share today's episode with someone and stay connected with us for more faith-filled guidance on school, life, and purpose.